Hey guys, so welcome back to another video, and in today's episode I just want to pose a few questions and I want to continue the conversation on decentering men. This isn't going to be a long video. I'm just going to be throwing some ideas out there. First of all, I want to start off by saying I 100% understand why women are afraid of men, right? We don't really look at the hidden causations of decentering men, right? We look at it like a hatred for men, which that also might, right? It might be fear, and it also might have a little bit of hatred in there. And this isn't about lesbianism. I don't think this is about homosexuality. But what the election has proven, and this is something I've been saying, especially here lately, that I've been noticing within American society, and just I would say the world in general, maybe, but I don't know too much about other countries, and I haven't really been outside of the US, so I can't speak globally, just from a geographical standpoint. But what is very evident to me is that there was no place in society where men were held accountable. And Donald Trump was very much one to, he was one to prove that, right? And so the thing about it was the loss against Harris wasn't just a representation of just general presidency, American electoral, candidates and things like that. It was a loss of hope, right? We're at a point now where women have a voice. Women have never had a voice in society, at least not to the extent that they've had a voice now, right? So this is why when we start talking about abuse, this is why when we start talking about narcissistic abuse, more specifically, the things that you can't prove in court, women who come online and they want to push these very old, out of touch, out of date rhetoric, this old narrative that it's a happy place, men are safe, men on average want to protect you and want to provide for you, right? They want to keep these very long held beliefs about religion and submissiveness, which, in a lot of ways, religious communities have really let down a lot of women. I can even say for myself, like religious communities have let down a lot of women, right? This is not a matter of just church hurt. This is just a matter of acknowledging the passivity within church culture, right? You talk about passivity, look at it in terms of education, right? Most Christians voted for Donald Trump, despite the racism, which I didn't understand why that wasn't enough for a lot of people, but most Christians actually voted for Donald Trump. Most Christians and most people within religious communities are typically going to turn a blind eye when a man is committing violence against a woman. That's just what it is, right? It is a culture in which women are to be subservient, right? People think that, a lot of Black women were happen on the Houdini, spirituality, African centralism or centroism, you know what I mean, wave in terms of spirituality. And that wasn't the case. A lot of Black people were leaving the church, not due to being upwardly mobile per se, although having a, higher education does kind of result in you moving away from religion. But it was really because religion, especially when it comes to Black women, has let so many Black women down. I can't tell you how many Black women I've heard who were stating that Kamala was a witch. Like, the ideals of witchcraft has such a hold on us that we never really move forward. We're never able to really take anything seriously and really engage in communities and within society in a productive way that could actually move us forward, right? The church was becoming more of a cult, and it was definitely akin to like Trump's Christian nationalist movement, because it keeps people in these confinement and it keeps away any real rationality, and there's no accountability. Although there was nothing wrong with grace, there was nothing wrong with forgiving people, we were at a point in time where there could not have been any more data. There couldn't have been any more testimonies, people coming out, men, women, Catholic Church and alike, talking about the abuse that they've experienced at the hands of the church, and the church just turning a blind eye to it. The church turning a blind eye to racism when people were educating one another about racism during the riots, during the protests. Like, the church has stood silent on so many different things that we're just at a point now where we can no longer afford to stay in here and just be like cooped up, standing neck and neck with one another, hating one another, because that's really what it is, right? Jealous of one another, making all these speculations. And it's like, it's really just at this point a bondage of fear, right? It keeps people in spaces where they're not productive. It keeps people just very ignorant, and it's just a very dangerous space to be at this point in time. So back to what I was saying about understanding the decentering men movement and understanding women's fear of men, right? Again, Donald Trump in this election is very evident of the realism that there are no consequences for the abuse that men commit against women. With narcissism on the rise, and it also kind of being a relatively new field of research, although narcissism has always been around, we understand the origins of narcissists, but at large, people were just now being educated about narcissistic personality disorders. And I will never justify narcissism, but what I will say is that I think this field is a little bit more complex. I think that there's not enough research to really, for what it's worth, I think Dr. Romney does a great job. I mean, she's definitely very vetted in terms of the research. But something that I would like to kind of interject when it comes to narcissism is that narcissism, especially for men, right, because it's mostly common in males, I don't necessarily think it always kind of prefaces on whether or not a person has had a really bad childhood, because a lot of narcissists are actually pretty successful and they're pretty powerful, right? Hence P. Diddy, hence R. Kelly, hence all the men who are still, Weinstein, right? Like all the men who are still committing these violent acts who are just not being caught, right? Like Diddy's not the only person out here who's doing this, right? There are a whole lot of men locally, statewide, celebrities that are committing violent acts against women, and they just haven't been caught. So this isn't just like a, oh my God, this is just Diddy thing. No, this is like a lot of men who are in positions where there's power and where there's money. So back to what I was saying, because I kind of lost my train of thought, but I believe that there's really something in believing that you are standing on top of the world, right? It's like the James Brown, it's a man's world. And I think for a lot of men who, even if they don't have the power and the influence, that is the thing that they want, right? That is what we're seeing today, especially even in terms of Christian communities and religious communities as well. There are mega churches popping up left and right, pastors, and they're all men. They have absolutely no credentials. There's no empathy. They still get online. They still hold up these same old rhetoric, instilling fear in women, committing violence in women within the church community, as well as just even in their own households. And there's never anyone to hold them accountable. So that's why women were afraid of men. Women were afraid of men because we were at a point in time where it's very evident that men can do whatever they want to you and to others, and there will never be a consequence for that, right? That's what Donald Trump communicated to Harris. This wasn't a matter of like, oh, this is the first woman's president. No, this is a matter of to say women in American society will never be seen as equal, will never be seen as anyone to protect, right? Think about it. Donald Trump literally has assaulted Kamala on numerous occasions, and there was never any recourse for that. There were never any consequences for that. This is someone who literally does not even have half of Kamala's credentials, who literally won the presidential election. That says a lot. It's not just about racism, especially, we start talking about sexism. Like, it's not just about racism. This is about the reality of being a woman, right? And so when you come out and you listen to women, when you listen to them, because most people don't, right? People will look at women and they're like, oh, you guys are just being emotional. But when you come out and you actually listen to women and you hear them out, what they're really saying is that I am not strong enough to be with a man, right? There's nothing I can do. There's no amount of boundaries I can set. There's not, it's no longer a matter of being a doormat, speaking up for yourself, setting boundaries, having standards, choosing better. This is the reality of living in American society. This is the reality of dealing with men, period. Because I don't feel like this is just American society. I'm just geographically challenged. Okay, so what that really communicated to a lot of us is that there's no hope for us here, right? And we are no different than other women who are in other states, in other countries, where they have to cover up, where they're controlled, where they don't, you know what I mean? Like, we're no different. We're no different. It was a sense of hope that we can actually be seen as equal. You know what I mean? That we would actually get the credit that is due, but there is none. It's not going to happen. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's for a lot of people who kind of just checked out and they just, were like, oh, this is just the present. No, it was so much more than that. It was about women being acknowledged as capable and fully competent. It was about seeing ourselves in a more powerful light, right? Let me say powerful, right? It was about seeing ourselves in a way seeing ourselves in a new way, right? To this day, and even now, we're going back, right? We're regressing. Women are being forced into subservience, right? Kamala represented something different. And Trump, only thing that Trump did and what men are doing today is constantly look at all the men on the internet who come online and they attack women. They're under women's comments. They're, you know what I mean? They're on podcasts saying the most hateful, heinous things towards women. They're committing the acts. You see what I'm saying? All this exploitation, and it's like there's no consequence. There's no consequence for that. There's no consequence for that. Even you look at the faultiness within the court system and its inability to even recognize any form of abuse that is not physical. Do you see what I'm saying? So what this really did was shine a light on the helplessness that is women. And if anything, it made people realize that, oh crap, yeah, women are victims, especially when it comes to their, partnership with men. And I'll end by saying this too, because I just kind of want to provide a little bit of a contrast to a lot of people and a lot of women who would classify as pygmies. But I wanted to kind of provide a little contrast to this because I think something that is so evident with these type of women is that, one, I think that they have been within the institutions, right? Whether that's religion, whether that's marriage, for far too long, that they actually no longer are viable parts of society, right? They no longer have the ability to voice things about modern society, right? Because it's like they've lived pretty sedentary lives. So they haven't really been able to advance with society in terms of like acknowledging what is going on and reckoning with modern day, right? So that's one thing. I think the second thing is, this is going to sound really harsh, but something that is very evident to me with women who will willingly ignore what women are saying about the abuse that they've experienced, the things that they've endured, right? And this is go both ways, but I'm going to touch on the one and then I have to go. But what is very evident is that these women, because of their proxy to patriarchy, because, for example, let me not say they're proxy to patriarchy. I'm trying to hear me wrap this up. But because these women have never experienced like proxy to patriarchy, right? This is why they want to be picked. They want to be chosen. They still have a fantasy, right, of this perfect relationship. They still have a fantasy of being saved and being rescued and a man showing up in their lives and providing them with all these resources, all this love, all this perfection, right? There's this idea in American society that really glamorizes heterosexual relationships, and it puts it on a pedestal and it makes women feel as though, oh my God, if I can just attain this, I'm going to do it better. You know what I mean? All these different things, right? And so what I've come to realize is that this idea of the good man, it typically only exists in your imagination. It's not anything that's real, right? Because when we start talking about good men, why is it that there's only like 4% out of the 96? 4% of the 96 who can actually come out and talk about these good men, right? Even the men who go online and berate women and talk about all the ways women need to be better for these said good men are not good men, right? These are men who actually instill fear, self-doubt, and inflict further harm on you and your self-esteem and confidence. So where are these good men, right? So these women who have never been picked, who have never been chosen, maybe they don't fit certain beauty standards, they will hold on to these beliefs and these ideas about the good man, and they're going to defend patriarchy, right? And then on the other side, you have women who have repeatedly, continuously, their entire lives, they've got a whole train wreck of bad relationships, baby dads, everything else, right? They've had terrible relationships, and these women will still blame themselves. These women are what we call the victims of patriarchy, right? These women will start to look at themselves and start to internalize and say, it is me, right? And because they no longer can, because they can't accept the fact that to partner with men on average is to actually be a victim, because nobody's going to hold this man accountable. You're not going to hold this man accountable. Hence why I said in the beginning, I'm not strong enough to be with a man, right? That's the modern thing about decentering men. It's like, yeah, because nothing that you do will quite frankly ever make somebody respect you, right? You can't possibly, you can't set boundaries enough. You can't do enough therapy. You can't heal enough. You can't do anything. You can't be alpha enough, whatever. Right? It's to the point where there's a reform that's going to happen when you try to do all that. You're like literally reconfiguring yourself. So there you have it. So these women are victimized, and instead of healing and like processing and just kind of sitting down and like going through the process of grief and coming to the reality, they would rather hold on to the fantasy, because many of us didn't have fathers who were protective, right? Again, our fathers are players in this thing here at patriarchy, right? Our fathers are the ones who are also doing the dirt, right? Who are also getting away without having any consequences. So that then shows up in your relationship with him, right? He doesn't just turn it off and have respect for you and no other woman. No, that's not how it works, right? And so these women who have been victimized time and time again, they keep showing up to play the game. They keep showing up to pull the slot machine, right? These women then turn around and they have to believe that there is something else out there, because what they really want is to be coddled, but they haven't really stepped into their power, and they haven't stepped into the realism that is being a woman in patriarchal society. And what this election has taught us, and what I'm just wrapping up here, is that you can't possibly be enough within a patriarchal society. It doesn't mean give up. It doesn't mean not try, but it does mean come to terms with reality. It does mean see the world for what it is. And if you want to be someone who is not helpless, then start making decisions and start getting in alignment with the things that can actually help restructure some things. Okay. So there's that. I also want to end with this too, and I'll pose the question, then I'll let you guys answer it in the comments. Do you think that people who find these good guys, this perfect love, this true story, is it their life, right? Is it destiny? Is it their alignment, right? I pose this question because I think about all the factors that really go into play when it comes to choosing a healthy partner, right? You hear psychologists talk about this all the time, right? You date people who are familiar to you, you date the parents that you've had and so forth, right? And even if that wasn't all the way true necessarily, and you can come on here and talk about how you really, read a book about someone who, come from an abusive background and they found love in a hopeless place, that'd be great. But I don't think that is everybody's lot. And this could just be philosophy. We don't have to take it as fact. We don't have to take it as anything, but just hear me out, right? I wonder, is that true for everybody, right? I do believe that we don't get everything. You're not going to get everything you want in life. But I also believe that people who find these 4% of men, these good guys, I do think that they were set up for that, right? They were set up for, that was their lot in life. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. And I know we could talk about outliers. We could talk about statistics. We could talk about, well, we actually can't talk about statistics. And sweetie, it's not my jam. It's not my jam. But let me know. It sounds cynical, but I just think that dating different guys, having all these different experiences, what is your reasoning, right? And if you don't find any of this, valuable, if you don't find any of this, credible, let me know. If you're a woman only, what is your reasoning for still believing, right? And again, this is not going to be for everybody, because I do think that there are a lot of women who unfortunately just have not had, and I don't want to say opportunities with men, because I just feel like that just puts men on the pedestal and it makes them out to be the quote unquote prize. But I do believe that there are a lot of women who just really, unfortunately, just haven't had enough experiences with men to know that, you know, it really doesn't matter which one you pick. You know what I mean? It really doesn't matter which one you pick, right? This is the reality of being a woman in American society, and this is the realities of being a man in American society. So as I get older, I start to understand, and I resonate with a lot of women who prior to my desire to be picked, and then I found that there was just nothing but an empty void, an empty box, right? What that would be like, you know? So this isn't really about my personal preference. I need to wrap up because I'm losing my train of thought, and I need to take the sweater off because I'm hot. But I genuinely want to know from you guys, right? And we can talk about moving forward with ideals and just having a sense of peace within your life if you are someone who has like decentered men. But I do think this conversation needs to be had because I think a lot of people are misunderstanding what is really happening and what has happened and what that communicated to millions of women and girls over the world, around the world. And yeah, it's so much bigger than just, you know, this is about American values, right? Trump didn't even have the credentials. So at this point, this goes back to morale, and this really just kind of pulls the sheet off of our eyes,